Welcome, everyone, to the Finding Free Thought podcast. We are very pleased to have you here listening. This week, we have an interview with Rob Primo. Rob is a human rights defender, and he really lives up to that title. I gotta say, he's a solid dude. He is also here in Canada. He's out in Niagara, and he's been standing up against all the COVID nonsense. I really tuned into his messaging around the time of the convoy and was so pleased to find such a clear and authentic voice on the scene, just standing up for his family, standing up for his community. As you'll hear in the show, this is someone who was actively taking care of the homeless people in his community, and when he saw that population explode, alarm bells went off for him, and he really felt a call to service. So we hope you enjoy this. Please follow all of Rob's socials. He has quite a big following on TikTok and Instagram, and rightfully so, because of just the clarity with which he speaks and the consistency with which he offers his strength. And we really were so privileged to sit down and chat with him, and we hope you enjoy the exploration, of the Canadian struggle right now that we really got deeply into. As always, please support the show. Please check out all the different ways you can do that. You can hit up Amanda's website at msha.ke/Amanda O'Donovan. And there's lots of ways you can connect with her offerings. Amanda has a great layout of oils kits. We use essential oils every day because straight up, they just offer incredible health freedom. They give you so much control in terms of supporting and treating and nurturing the body. It's really pretty amazing how specific and how powerful they are. You can also check out her human design offerings, and please hit up my website as well, simonesler.com. You can find all of my work there. Especially you can connect to my new series, Superorganism, which is a deep dive into the occulted war on the family, which is much older than people realize, and some of the ideas that I've brought forward to fight back. Some ideals, specifically one about the family as a superorganism and how powerfully we can embrace that based on just the science, the existing knowledge of the family as it is. So check out Superorganism. It's now streaming on Dauntless Dialogue, dauntlessdialogue.com. It's $5 a month, and just that $5, which is really just the cost of a movie rental, will actually get you access to the whole platform and all the amazing, amazing films. It's really some of the most solid research and disclosure-based work that you'll find, just exposing the real nastiness that's going on. So it's pretty hype. I really recommend it, and it's a great chance to see my latest work. So please enjoy this episode, and we will see you guys next time. Welcome, everyone, to the Finding Free Thought podcast. We're so glad to have you here today, and we have a really exciting guest. We have Rob Primo with us, who is going to throw down with us about Canadian corruption and what's been going on here in Canada, and we're really pumped to have him on board. So welcome, Rob. Why don't you introduce yourself and give everyone a sense of where you're coming from?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having a platform like this and, doing your job, doing what you're doing, bringing awareness to everything that's going on in our country right now. So I live in Niagara. I kind of began getting involved in this fight, I want to say close to about 2 years ago now. The one thing that really inspired me is I've always been in touch with helping the homeless community locally here. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I realized that the population of homelessness in my region was on a rampant rise. And there wasn't very much assistance out there for these people who needed the supports. I contacted the city, I contacted city council. I was trying to do as much as I can to get these people help, but it wasn't available because they were prioritizing what was going on with this virus. And they were forgetting about things like mental health and homelessness and addiction. And in my opinion, I saw those things as the real crisis that was spiraling out of control. So I began to elevate my voice, and I seen some people locally that at the time were taking part in something that they called No More Lockdowns Niagara, and they were doing the same thing. They were putting themselves out there, and they were speaking truth, and they were all receiving criminal charges for speaking truth, and they were definitely being gaslit and looked down on by the media for taking a brave stance. And it empowered me to want to get onto their level and commit to the level of fighting that they were. Like I said, it just didn't seem fair that the same people were putting on a protest every single week, and they were getting charged every single week. And others who were a part of this community weren't stepping up and putting themselves out there as well. So I went ahead and did that, and I started organizing protests in the Niagara region. And they seen me as a threat to the system really quick, because I was just relentless, and I wasn't scared. I let go of fear at this point in my life, and they came at me really hard. I received more charges at once, more than anyone in Canada. They gave me 8 provincial court
Wow.
summons.
Mhm.
Yeah, 8 provincial court summons. I was charged at once in Welland, Ontario. I was at a protest. There was maybe 10 other people there. These could have led to a maximum of $800,000 in fines and 8 years in prison. So
Wow.
that's what happened to me. And once this happened, I had a decision to make. It was either do I cower out and wow, you guys really scared me, and I made the biggest mistake of my life, kind of thing, or do I continue to stand in the truth in hope that I'm doing what's right and that in the end I'll be rewarded without these ridiculous consequences? And I chose to put my foot down on the gas pedal and go full steam ahead and just hope for the best.
Wow. Yeah, it's been kind of intense here in Ontario, I would say specifically. They've really pushed things as far as they can in Ontario. It really started to give me a sense of what the existing corruption here must have been for this level of like infringement on people's freedoms, that they held on to a lot of the rules and regulations the longest here. They pushed things as far as they could, and like to me it speaks to that. Like what is your understanding of why we seem to be in an area of the world where they're testing some of the extremes of these illegal mandates and things like that?
Well, you know what? I think it has to do with being Canadian. I think we're very nice people. I think we're loving. I think we're caring. We're compassionate. That's how we are by nature. And I think that we've never really thought about needing to stand up for our rights, for our children's rights, for our children's rights. We're so used to the system that we think serves us. And clearly, I think it's been very apparent over the last couple of years that that's the last thing that they do. We can't even have oppositional conversations go on anymore, as I'm sure you're aware. Our media is no longer asking questions. I miss the days when you used to turn on the TV and you would see two people with different opinions hash out why they feel so strong in their certain beliefs, and then it would be my job or your job to decide what side we stand on, and where we stand with what we just heard. Now it's not so much of a journalist job to inform you of a few different situations, and then you pick what best suits you or what you believe in or what goes along with your values. It's more of them telling you what's going on. In the eyes of the state, they fund these people to tell you what it is they want you to hear, what it is they want you to believe.
Yes, absolutely. There's like thought crimes now where you can't even discuss things. Especially, I noticed on Instagram, it's become very extreme where you can't even call politicians certain names in the comments. they'll restrict even that. So they don't even want you attacking the character of politicians in some of these social media spaces. So it's gone pretty far. I think too though, about what Canada needed to wake up into what was really going on. Because, like I said, there had to be a certain amount of corruption existing before this whole COVID narrative unfolded. And I do wonder, what did Canada need to wake up to that? And maybe some of this is helpful. Like, do you see all this pressure coming from, elite politicians and these groups that are in power? Do you see that as, in the long term, maybe a more positive thing for Canada waking up to what's really going on and what we could really be as a country?
That's a really good question. And I have a lot of different thoughts on it. I do think that something like this needed to happen. As you can tell, each day we go on, more people are starting to become more aware of what's going on. There's people are so used to this, left politician or right politician, and as humanity, I think it's our job to realize that, whether we're right leaning, whether we're left leaning, center right, center left, we're all going to have to give a little to get a little, and you know right now we're seeing things happen, all these things that we were called conspiracy theories for the last 2 years. We could write out a page right now. It's like every single thing down the list has come to fruition. And you know I think that there's been some incredible overreach. I think that Canadians' human rights have been completely trampled on. And I think that, what happened in Ottawa there with the convoy, where everyone, stood in peace, stood united, crossed arms, held hands, sung "O Canada," while you watched the state bring violence on peaceful protesters. I think that changed a lot. I think that made a lot of people realize what's going on, because you would see this image that was painted by mainstream media. And, I was doing the same thing. I would watch mainstream media from my hotel room while I was warming up or getting a bite to eat. And it's like, this is crazy. And I would have friends and family members texting me like, get out of there. You got to get out of there right now. And I'm like, you don't understand. This is nothing what it looks like on TV. From
Yeah.
watching this in the hotel room to walking out in front of the hotel and seeing what's going on, it's two completely different things. Even myself, I was not aware that the media in this country had that much of an influence on Canadians.
I think it woke a lot of people up to the media's power because, a lot of the attacks on like CBC and Global and a lot of these media corporations that get funding from the Liberal government, I think one of the things that tricked people the most was that just came across as a conservative talking point, as just a conservative jab against the Liberals. And it's like people got really caught up for years in that sort of left right dichotomy without realizing that this really was state funded media in a way that I think they have an agenda that supersedes left and right wing politics, right? That's what's become clear now is they're not looking to necessarily make everyone left wing or everyone right wing. They're looking for a level of control, and they'll use whatever party they need to get that control together. So for you, you're saying that this woke you up to the level of corruption that the media has. Did you experience any like hit pieces where did they write about you and personally attack you?
They have, but not specifically at the convoy. But I'll tell you one thing that did happen to me at the convoy that really left me disappointed. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Evan Solomon. Evan Solomon, he's on CTV's Power Play, and he's a one of the biggest journalists in our country. And there was a point in the convoy where a lot of people were frustrated, rightfully so, with the things that these people have said and the division they've caused, and all the inappropriate words they've called people. And they were kind of just chanting like, go home media and stuff like that. And you could tell these people were uncomfortable. And I went over to Evan Sullivan and I said to him, hey, listen, I have a particular influence on this crowd. How about I get you out of here, and me and you go and we have an interview with each other. I said, I guess I'm what they would consider, some type of leader in the freedom movement. I don't know who else you would, want to interview. You're here to interview people. Why don't you give me a chance and let's do this interview? So he thanked me for, kind of calming the crowd down, and I took off with him. And we went inside of a little hotel lobby there. And I did an interview with him, heart to heart, very sincere. It was about an hour long. And he promised me, I said, you promised me, man, you're really going to air some of this? Like, you're going to pull some points out of here? He goes, I promise. Of course I will. Thank you so much. What's your name? Yada, yada, yada. And then later on that night, I was looking forward to watching this on TV because I knew that everything I said was really good and that it was going to credit the convoy and the participants there. And what happened is I was on it for maybe a second and a half, and it was at a point where the police shot an air cannon. And so literally there's just a video of like the police coming at people with their batons and that. And then I just get spooked by an air cannon like that. And that's the only part they put on there. And I just, I went back to my room and I thought, Rob, you got fooled again. You got too nice of a heart. You really spent an hour of your day with this guy, hoping that you could portray this good image that's here with all these good people. And you literally just got fooled.
Wow. Well, that's really telling, though, that one of the biggest journalists in Canada will just lie to someone's face like that. It's really, again, it's so beyond left and right wing politics. It's so dangerous. And Amanda and I were talking about this today, that you have Rebel News that's trying to balance things out, and what they're doing is really important. But at the same time, they're still not at the level that these mainstream media outlets are. And you don't really have any mainstream dissenting voice. Like, sometimes you notice in America, some serious dissent will make it up to the highest levels of media. They really will call certain things out. Whereas in Canada, it just seems so totally dominated. And you have to wonder, like, how we got here. Where were the checks and balances that stopped this kind of thing from happening? I remember growing up and all this propaganda about support the CBC, and that the CBC was always in trouble, was always being threatened. You had to swoop in and donate to the CBC. And like, I grew up with that constantly. My parents were always listening to CBC, and it always seemed very innocent to me. And now it's become this very obvious weapon. Like, it's just a weapon against the people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you anymore. And I mean, you're just a normal dude from Canada. I mean, we all grew up listening to the CBC and throwing the CBC on. And I'm not by any means like this super awake person who's been awake to all this stuff for a very long time by any means. This is all new to me when this virus came around. I just started seeing things for what they were. I started asking a lot of questions. And at this point in my life, I started taking my health a little bit more serious, and I just didn't feel comfortable putting something in my body that wasn't studied enough, and it just didn't make sense to me that if you don't do this, you can't go watch your kids play hockey. If you don't do this, you can't go to a funeral. If you don't do this, you don't have a right to an education. It seemed like it was so out there. I can't believe that anybody was in support of this at all. Mm-hmm. And, in my opinion, this is discrimination across the board. In my opinion, this is no different than, discriminating someone's sexual orientation, discriminating someone because they have a disability, discriminating someone because of the color of their skin. Discrimination is discrimination across the board, in my views. And I didn't see this any differently.
Yeah, and now we found out this video that's circulating right now that shows one of the directors at Pfizer admitting that they never even tested the vaccine for transmission, for stopping transmission. So they didn't even test it to stop transmission. Then they released it, and we were put under this this scenario where the vaccine was supposedly necessary for society to go on when none of it had even been checked by Pfizer themselves in terms of stopping transmission. So it seems like the scientific basis for the passports has been completely blown out of the water now. I mean that there's nothing else left to me. I can't imagine why the passports made any sense to begin with. But now, even in their own little world of sort of scammy science, in my opinion, there's nothing left to justify it. And of course, here we just had those things starting to lift recently. How do you see the relationship here between like pharmaceutical companies and media now? Like, has your perspective on any of that changed in terms of, you said you woke up to more health freedom, right? Taking care of your health and all that. How do you see this whole, I don't know, cabal of entities?
I really don't know what to say. I mean, exactly that video I seen, well, we were all made aware of recently. What an eye opener. And I actually had a friend of mine reach out to me and say, we knew this was going to happen. Like, why even talk about it? And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, this is the biggest news as far as I'm concerned in a long time, because I have always been about accountability. And people would say things like, oh, these people just want to overthrow the government. And oh, these people just want to fight, or they want violence, or they want this. And it's like, no, you got to say that about us for 2 years straight. You got the whole community to turn on us. You got us to look like everything we're not. And we stood in the truth that entire time. So now it's time to hold you accountable legally and lawfully. And that's where I'm at with all of this. Like, for example, my charges, they were all withdrawn. Now, keep in mind, these were withdrawn after 15 months or so of me not being able to sleep every single night. I have 3 children. So, being a dad and advocating for your children, which is what I was doing, it's a pretty scary thought when you're trying to go to bed after you get your kids to bed and not knowing, if you're going to go to jail. And every single time I would speak with the Crown prosecution, they were trying to get me to do a plea deal, basically saying like, hey, you're going to end up going to jail. So if you just pay $20,000 in fines, you're not going to get jail time. You'll just get 18 months probation. And, I'm constantly stewing and worrying and, with inflation, how can I afford these fines? And I really don't think I did anything wrong. So why should I plea into this? So, I held out, and it turned out that, it was all empty threats, and it was all intimidation. And it affected me mentally, for sure. And, it'll never be reversed, the damages that have been done.
Yeah.
So, I plan on going forward and doing some lawsuits and things of these nature, and not so much for myself, but for others as well, because it sets quite a precedent that they can just charge me with all these things, scare me, intimidate me, kind of make me sit at home and not engage in this fight as much as I'd like to, in fear of what the next consequences may be. Like there's just so many different levels, but I don't want them to be able to do that to anyone else. Like, what can they do? Every time they don't get their way, are they just going to charge somebody? This person's going to have charges for 2 years, and then they're just going to be able to drop them. And then if they want to do it again, they can do it again. Well, no, that's not fair. So I plan on going after these people. I plan on suing them, and I plan on making it so they can't just do this to Canadians.
It does seem like a lot of this was like psychological warfare. I noticed that in Canada especially, that they made you believe certain rights were gone when they really weren't. They tried this with the travel at the beginning, tried to say that you really shouldn't be traveling and you're going to have so much trouble traveling if you do. And we saw right past that. We personally traveled right away in the first lockdown. We went and flew over to North Carolina, and it became clear because we would talk to a lot of people and they'd be like, oh, you can't travel right now. No one's allowed to travel. And none of that was true. So, I think that in Canada, again, like they were able to mislead a lot of people based on the notion that people don't seem to understand their rights properly here. And I think that's been eye-opening for me, that when a population doesn't understand their rights, they can be led into the idea that their rights are gone.
Absolutely. It's just mind control and manipulation, brother. You said it right there. When this was all going on, I went over the border twice. I've never told anybody that until right now because at that time, they would have definitely targeted me. But I had no issue. And a lot of people were afraid to cross the border because they were going to get that $6,500 fine or 6,200, whatever it was. But it was intimidation, right? Like I have people reach out to me every day. Everybody who's gotten charged with that it just gets dropped. Like it's not real, unless unfortunately they've gotten certain people to plead into it because there's nothing behind that will make that stand.
Yeah, I did hear about a wealthy Canadian guy. It's like a millionaire or billionaire or something. I can't remember his name, but he had just resigned to pay everything and break all the rules and just stay free. And so he was like, whatever, it's just the cost of doing business. So he was constantly going around and just, yeah, paying it off. Even though it seems like the main story coming out of most people's experience is that they don't end up having to pay it. And I've even seen border agents lie to people and say, I saw a video on TikTok just a week or so ago of this border agent saying, it's a lie that you won't have to pay it. You will have to pay this. People are having to pay them. And really, like, doing their best to scare people. Like, how do you think that they got these lower level people to enact some of these atrocities? Because I know there's the idea of the upper level elite corruption, but what have you seen in terms of, people who are border agents and security guards, police
Yeah.
officers, like actually reinforcing some of this stuff? What's been your experience of that?
Well, I can tell you that the police officers where I live, they didn't want anything to do with my charges, and a lot of police officers don't. When I was charged, 7.01, 7.03 of the Reopening Ontario Act, I believe it's called, and Breaking the Emergencies Management Act. This was handed out by bylaw. They could not get police officers in our area to charge people with this. The only way police in my area were charging people is if they had multiple of these tickets and then they were getting a mischief charge. So it would take a while to build up to that mischief charge. And that's the only way you could get them to. But I mean, a lot of police officers are not for this. And I, early on in this fight, I really tried really hard to rally behind the police. And I thought that might be our answer. When we have that line with all the police there, and there's thousands and thousands and thousands of Canadians. If they just turned around with us and did a little peace sign, what are their bosses going to do if every single one of them just said, hey, we're not going against the people? Unfortunately, we didn't see that happen. Also, the police officers who did raise their voice and use their voice, they were made an example out of. There's a lot of officers that people don't know about that spoke up. They made videos that said things like, hi, my name's so-and-so, and I just want you to know that I support a return to normal. I respect the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and the oath I took is very important. And these videos they would make, they ended up getting 3 charges against the PSA, the Police Service Act. So not like criminal charges, but charges that could end up to them being disciplined or let go at work. So it makes it really hard for these people to speak up, like they really rip their tongue out, and they know that they're going to be looked down on, they're going to be punished. And then for people who are looking to move up the ladder and become sergeants and whatnot one day, well, that might be where you slip right there, and you might not be entitled to that position in the future.
Yeah, again, so much of this was just coercion, threats, intimidation. There was very little basis. There was seemingly no legal or scientific basis for any of it, which is so important to remind people of, because I think a lot of people want to move back into the normalcy without really dealing with the darkness of what happened and what its implications are.
Well, because the pain and the mental health and even physical health and the homelessness is still going to go on for quite a long time, right? All of these things. And I'm so glad you're still out there doing it, because a lot of people have wanted to just shove it away and push it under the rug, and the effects are all around us. Like, it's severe.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need to make things right because, I don't want to play poor me, but I mean, even someone like myself, for an example, like I'll never get a job working where I've worked before. I used to have a really respected reputation. I've worked with individuals with disability as a social worker my entire life. I've worked for both school boards. I was an outstanding member in my community who always did volunteer work, who hosted events for the homeless, all that kind of stuff. And I can't do any of that stuff. In fact, we had a program running here locally when this happened. And when they found out that I went to a protest, they came to the designated area we had set up for the homeless where we were feeding them and clothing them. And they told me that because I wasn't wearing a mask and I was at a protest, that I could no longer help the homeless out there. So who do you think you really hurt? You gave me an extra 2 nights a week with my family and my kids, but you took away an extra 2 nights a week where people were getting fed, people were getting clothes, and people were getting connected with resources that they needed at that time.
Yeah, I mean, we saw a lot of this behavior here in Toronto. We saw bulldozers, like actually just bulldozing these tent cities of where people have been living. The mayor just called in bulldozers and just destroyed these whole tent
Yeah,
cities.
and again, fired social workers who wouldn't get vaccinated, and
Yep.
already in a place where there's like, we need social workers, we need more people, and like yourself, you get refused the ability to help.
Yeah.
When there's more, of a need for that. And people are still, someone I was just talking to a few months ago is just getting fired, like sort of retroactively for the vaccine, even at this point. So that woke me up to the fact that there is a lot of this that is still going on, behind the scenes.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing that happened recently, I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but it's a step in the right direction, is there was a tribunal in Ontario where a gentleman who was working, he wasn't able to get EI because he didn't have the jab. And what happened is he took it to a tribunal and they ended up ruling in his favor. So that's going to set a precedent that anybody who was refused EI because they didn't take the jab is going to be entitled to getting EI and that retroactive back pay, which is good to see because you shouldn't how criminal is it that we pay into a system that we can't access because of a medical decision we made, right? Like, it's just not fair.
It's really deeply wrong, and I think we saw this in our family. We had family members who were coerced into getting the jab because they didn't know what other choice they had, and it was so wild the way the timing worked out because it was after so many people got coerced into it, they just lifted the passport like a month later. So all these people had given up their medical sovereignty for something that only lasted a month. I mean, to me, it was a big victory that got lifted, but at the same time, was it just a big fuck you to all these people who had made that sacrifice? And, it was very disturbing to see. Now, I noticed that you were talking about a case that you were observing. I think it was in your stories today. Now, there's a publications ban on something that you've been following, right? Are you able to share anything about this?
Yeah, so I mean, all I can really share is just it was very encouraging to see. A person that I know is dealing with a case in Ottawa, but there's a publication ban, so you can't really talk about much to do with it. But this person has taken the time to represent themselves. And I noticed they used to have a little bit of a following on Instagram and they just disappeared. And I'm like, kind of weird that this person just disappeared. But what they did is their contribution towards the fight was they got all these charges and they decided they were going to start studying law and taking matters into their own hand and filling out their own motions and bringing things forward. And, when I heard this happen, I assumed that they were going to just get eaten alive in court because you're going up against a crown with the judge or the justice, whoever's there. These people do this for a living, but they're not used to getting challenged by someone who's actually advocating for themselves. And, when we use a lawyer, we pay a lawyer, and they're there to do a job. I don't think personally, like, of course they want a winning record and of course they care, but no one's going to care about, the end result as much as you or I are going to care when it comes to our case and the possibility of a criminal record. So, I mean, I really salute this person for taking this on. And I realize, knock on wood, I hope I don't get into any type of trouble ever again. But I mean, talking will get you in trouble these days. So if that ever happens again, I think that I'll be doing my own work to try and represent myself as well, because that seems like it's the way to go.
Wow.
Yeah, that's really admirable.
Wow.
Do you feel like the publications ban was put on it for reasons of protecting like the sort of government side of things, or why do you feel that ban was put on it?
You know what? To be honest, I didn't get a fair chance to ask this person. And sometimes the publication ban will not only be put on for the government's sake, but it'll be put on for the accused sake. However, in this case, I do think this is put on because of the government's sake, because I know this specific case um, has something to do with the Emergency Measures Act as well. So I don't think they would want any of that stuff getting out until the Emergency Review Committee is done. I don't know that. I'm just assuming that.
Yeah, well, it's the second time I came across a really big story where the government was using a publications ban. There was the story of the dad out in BC whose daughter got transitioned by the schools, and all the activist lawyers and the activist doctors and all this, and that seemingly was really just to protect their side of things, as far as I could tell. So there does seem to be a precedent to the government using publications bans to suppress and censor and to defend their own image. That seems to be a big thing, I would say. Very curious. I hope to hear more about this case when this person has finished their fight.
Yeah, this is the type of person who will definitely talk about everything when they can.
Wow.
Just obviously they're limited at the current time.
And so what do you see for yourself moving forward? Like, you're really, been promoting yourself to an extent as a citizen journalist here and keeping people connected with narratives that are often not covered properly. You're continuing to grow your influence. Where do you want to go with that? Like, what do you want to continue to offer?
Man, that's a great question. I'm not too sure exactly where I want to go with this. I have days where I wake up and I'm like, I can't wait until this ends so I can stop doing this. But then at the same time, I get some inspiring messages, and I get messages from people thanking me or cheering me on or saying, I've had people say to me before, like, I almost ended my life until I was a part of a live stream with you last night. And it's like, wow.
Wow.
Like I mean, I don't know what I didn't do anything special for that, but it's realizing that people have actually, for some reason, looked up to me and count on me for certain things. And, I have a hard time letting people down like that as well. I know a lot of people in this movement have changed directions, and they've said, well, we need to stop fighting the system and we need to set up a parallel society. And I agree with them on a certain degree. However, there's things that are a part of this system we need, like healthcare. And, I can tell you firsthand how flawed our healthcare system is. I'm not sure if you ever seen the video that I put out with what happened to my daughter this summer, but we could talk about that quickly if you have
Yeah,
it.
no, I
Yeah,
haven't
yeah.
seen it. Go ahead. Please tell us.
Long story short, my girlfriend was with my daughter at the splash pad. They were having a fantastic time. And my little girl was running around with her friends as fast as she could. And she ran headfirst into one of the metal poles, split her head open. Like, I'm talking no exaggeration, like that. Like, you could see her forehead. Like, I almost passed out. So I got a call that said, oh my goodness, she just hit her head. We're on our way to the hospital. I was in a state of shock, literally driving like 150 through the city streets to get to the hospital. And when my daughter seen me, she ran and jumped into my arms. And I'm like, she was concussed, in shock, blood all over my shirt, blood all over my hands, and like, not to be too graphic, but like pulsating on my face, like blood everywhere. And the lady from the hospital runs up to me and she's like, "Where's your mask?"
Oh God.
And at this point, I'm pretty good at keeping control, but I'm like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" And she's like, "You can't be in here without a mask." And I'm like shaking. I'm like, do you see my daughter right now? I'm like, I don't care about a mask. I'm like, get a doctor for my daughter. Like, she's like, "No, sir, like you're gonna have to leave if you don't put a mask on." And I'm like, I'm not putting a mask on. And I just like walked to like the first room with my daughter and just sat down in there. And then this lady like kept coming and like trying to start a confrontation with me about this mask. And like finally I just seen like a doctor in the other room and I was like, excuse me, can you come here?" And I was like, "I'm not in a good spot. Like, can you like get this lady away from me? Like, I'm not putting a mask on. I don't care about a mask. I don't care about your rules. I don't care about putting a mask on my daughter's head, her face. Like, she needs about 15 staples in her forehead right now, and I can see her skull. I'm not worried about putting a mask on my face. I'm worried about calming her down." And sure enough, like it was a big deal, and they just kept going and going. And I didn't put anything on, and it all worked out. And the doctors apologized for this lady after. But you know, like when everything was done and this big traumatic experience was over, she was like, she said something to me along the lines of like, "This would have been a lot easier if you just had put that on." And I was like, "Well, this would have been a lot easier for me if you put my daughter and her health first over this stupid mask thing." And we left it at that. But you know, I spoke out about it right away, and a lot of people, some people criticized me, and they said, you know, "I don't know why you would pull your camera out for that situation and whatnot." And I'm like, because you guys don't understand how serious this is. Like, we're bringing people to the hospital who are losing a couple quarts of blood in shock. We don't know what's going to happen, and we're worried about a mask. We're not worried about treating them. And this wasn't my first experience either. You know, one day I found a gentleman who overdosed, and I called an ambulance. And when the ambulance was showed up, the person's on the ground and needs Narcan, and like they're putting like suits on and gloves on, and like they're trying to ask this person if they've had a fever. And I'm like, "Yo, I've been here for 10 minutes. Like, the guy's like, he's almost dead. Like, he needs you to give him the Narcan, man. Like, he's not answering." He's like, "Oh yeah, it's just part of our procedure." And I'm like, oh my goodness. It's like we've neglected every single health matter across the board, except for this one, especially all these things that trump it, which is absolutely ridiculous.
I think it was in BC where the overdose deaths eclipsed COVID deaths like by quite a bit.
But no, very few, or they were announcing it, but nobody was lifting it up.
There wasn't a rush to alter the structure of our whole society to save these people overdosing.
No, it was kind of like, oh well, they're overdosing, it's their fault. Yeah, that's what I heard a lot of. That's what I heard. Absolutely. No sympathy. Just trash.
Absolutely. And a lot of people who deal with addictions, I have myself, I'm like an open book. I struggled with alcohol. And the problem with this whole situation that came to fruition is that when this pandemic started, all of a sudden you get a phone call. "Hey, it's you know, John calling from AA. We just want to let you know that the in-person services have been canceled due to the pandemic for everyone's safety." And you're like, "Oh wow, this is like my savior. This is what keeps me straight, right?" And then it's like, okay, well, I talked to a counselor, you know, like I'm just using this as an example. Say that doesn't work. That's one of your avenues to put that energy towards. So you talk to a counselor or a psychologist or something of that nature, and all of a sudden these are canceled. And then all of a sudden you don't have one-on-one counseling. You're able to go to a group counseling. So I was going to a group counseling where I talked with people. It was almost like a men's group. There was a few women there as well. But the issue with this is everybody wanted to talk about this pandemic. And that's the last thing in the world I wanted to talk about. So this was making it harder to stay on track.
Right.
So they were stripping people of all the supports they had to be successful. And then you have these people who were addicted to things like opiates, heroin, etc. Now, these people have been clean. I probably lost 5-10 friends since it started for that. People who were on methadone, the opiates, heroin, and they quit. I know there was one guy I know that died. He's been clean for 14 years.
Oh my
and
God.
when he relapsed, of course, he went to do the same amount that he normally did. And he's been clean for 14 years. So that was a fatal dose now. Boom, dead.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's true. The services, the supports, the community centers. We saw a lot here in Toronto with the libraries, where people usually wash their clothes and go to the mall and have social time that, is just around normal society, because being in normal society is also healthy, even though, these people aren't well. But now you have no coffee shops, where do you go to have human contact that is life sustaining?
Right. And then we get in this position where only certain things are essential. And of course, alcohol is essential. Of course, dope's essential. And I'm not painting that all with a bad brush, because there's people who can tolerate that. And there's people that enjoy that. And there's nothing wrong with enjoying those things at all. But for those of us who struggle with those types of things, you steal the supports, you fill people's bank accounts with money, and you leave the alcohol store and the drugstore open. Can't go to Walmart and buy my kid new underwear, but I can go to the beer store and buy beer and a bag of dope on the way home. Right?
Yes, this is what we noticed. Like, things would be, we'd go to like a Dollarama, and there'd be, we have a kid here. We'd go to Dollarama, and they would they'd stop you like buying kids' clothes, but you could get a full selection of chocolate bars.
Yeah.
Absolutely, right? Like, where's the common sense in any of this? I actually got myself in a lot of trouble because there were some things that I needed for my child at Walmart. And finally, I took down the ribbon and I just walked down the aisle and I got what I needed. And I went to the self-checkout and I scanned it through, and they're like, no, you can't get that. And I just kept walking and I put it in my car and locked the door, and then I drove away. And then the next thing you know, the police are at my house wanting to arrest me. And I'm like, yeah, what are you going to do? Arrest me for buying, stuff for my kid? Like, come on.
Yeah, like art supplies or something. And then to see the kids too, it's like, yeah, they'll survive, but they're looking at it going, what the heck is going on in the world? Like, I'm not allowed to buy toys, but you can buy like these drugs. Like, what?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And it's like, at the same time, they were putting caution tape around all the climbers here in Toronto, trying to stop the kids from using the climbers. We ended up getting in a confrontation with a security guard who was trying to kick us off, and we were saying, no, just let the kids play. Like, just what are you talking about? None of this has anything to do with science. But now we're in this aftermath of it. And I think, it's going to be a tough balance between handling the mass trauma that is going to unfold for the next decade, at least. All the mental health issues this has caused, some of that is very slow in revealing itself. It's not necessarily going to explode. And at the same time, we need to be getting healthier and fighting back and trying to make sure that this can never happen again. I've noticed parents, I think, were really motivated. In a sense, there was a lot of motivation in being a parent right now. I know as a father, it really made me want to stand up right away because I immediately saw the impact on my kids very soon in the process. What has been your experience in terms of fatherhood and like stepping up as a dad and what you've seen from other dads in your neighborhood? Because I have to say, I was disappointed in a lot of the dads here. A lot of them they fully submitted to all of this and didn't stand up for the kids or themselves. And I really struggled with that.
That's been the biggest eye opener, Simon, for me this entire time is who I've taken a lot of heat for the things I've said to some of these parents, because they need to check themselves and they need to realize that you got to make, you got to figure it out. Are you your kid's parent? Are you your kid's guardian? Or do they belong to you? You created them. Do they belong to you, or do they belong to the system? One or the other. And you better figure it out quick, because the system thinks they belong to them and they don't. And that was the biggest thing. I spent a lot of time teaching parents how to get their children out of masks, teaching parents how to compile legal documents to submit to the school and superintendents to let them know that if their child was ever jabbed at school, there would be legal legal discourse after. And the thing that used to bother me about it all the time is how, it was nice to help these people out, but I couldn't believe how many people would just ask for your help and they didn't want to put any of the work in. I would say, like, this is what you got. I'd go on the phone. Okay, this is what you got to type out or whatever. And people would be like, well, do you already have it like done? Can you just send it to me? And it's like, yeah, but like your child goes to a different school. Your child has a different name. You're like, let's just do this together. Like, I'm not getting anything out of this other than helping your child and knowing I'm helping children out. Like, can you not put 10 minutes into your effort into your kids? But we failed our kids more than anything. As far as I'm concerned, these children, and with the immune systems they have, they shouldn't even know what this virus is. They shouldn't even know about it. And they all know about it. They all had to worry about it. I had my child come home a couple times and ask me the one time, they used it. They knew who I was. And they said to her at one of her old schools, something along the lines of, I hope your daddy doesn't die because he doesn't get the vaccine.
Oh.
And so she came home the one night and she's crying and crying and crying. And me and my daughter are very close. Like, I have custody of my daughter. She's been with me since the day she was born. We're like, you can't detach us, right? And she's crying and crying. I go, what's wrong, sweetheart? My teacher told me that she hopes you don't die because you don't. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like,
Wow.
who are these people to mentally manipulate children because they want them to do something that they did? Like, where did we go where we don't respect parents' decisions? Like, are you going to start telling these kids what religions they can and cannot belong to, what social groups they can and cannot belong to, what kind of sports they can play and can't play? Like, I will do anything for my kids, and I mean anything. Fight for them, stand in front of a bullet for them, advocate for them. It doesn't matter what it is. And I think everyone needs to be on the same page with that. People used to say to me, how do you get your kid into school without a mask on? And I said, well, I went to the school once and I told the principal, my kid doesn't wear a mask. Why? Because she's too pretty and I don't want her smile behind a mask. That's it. It's simple. Don't ever put a mask on my kid. And that was it. And they took that respective stance. And other people weren't so lucky. And I would say, well, I don't know what to tell you. Like, my principal was like, I don't want you protesting on my lawn one day. And I was like, yeah, so don't put a mask on my kid. Like,
Deal.
Straight up. Like, I know that sounds pretty crazy, but to me, it sounds pretty crazy to just invasively cover my child's face for 8 hours a day and make them breathe in the same air.
Yeah. No, we
gotta stand up one way or another, however you can.
We were fortunate that we were homeschooling at the time, so we didn't have to fight too much with the masking with the kids. But we've had little bits of it here in Toronto. Like
Going to Sick Kids Hospital is one. We regularly have to go with our son, and so fighting with them so that the kids don't have to wear a mask, and then in the end, just to see doctors fucking walking around chinning it, and you're like, why did you fight me on my kid? I know it's a hospital, but you're not taking care once you're in the grounds. You just want the sort of formality.
But it's all over the map. Like, it so clearly has to do with people's own personal anxiety and their sense of socialization, because you have doctors and sick kids and nurses and sick kids walking around with the mask on their chin. But then there were times when we had to do a Zoom call with a doctor and he shows up on the Zoom call alone in a room in a double mask and a visor on a Zoom call with us. And so it's like, well, he feels crazily scared, but the nurses who are walking around with it on their chin, they don't care. So what's really going on here?
It's a clown world, bro. Like the one day when they were closing these schools and they're doing the online learning, my daughter comes up to me for a snack the one day and she goes, "Dad, why does my teacher have a mask on?" And I'm thinking, no way. So I look on the screen, mask, visor, gloves, teaching the classroom of kids by yourself. I didn't even know what to tell my daughter. I looked at her, I said, "You know what, honey? Why don't you ask her? I don't know what to do. Why don't you ask her?" So I mean, I never heard what the end result is of that, but what kind of virtue signal are we sending to these kids? Like, the teacher's in a room and needs to wear gloves, a mask, and a face shield. Do you not think that resonates with the child a certain type of way? Do you not think that promotes fear? Do you not think that's going to make children afraid to leave their house? They look up to these people who are doing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so I wanted to get your thoughts on, where you see things going, because now Canada has this big challenge of waking up to what's really happened, because I think that's still going on. I think you still have people just now waking up. I think there's a slow process. Like you said yourself, there's a lot of this you just weren't awake to until your time came. So, what do you see on the horizon here? We seem to be up against a group of criminals who don't have any regard for the law or for human rights. Do you feel hopeful about Canada, about moving forward? Where do you see it all going?
I do feel hopeful about Canada. I feel hopeful about the whole world. I think we're going to see a heavy influence with America. They have a vote coming up in November. A lot of their states are going to be turning into a certain direction. And I want to make very clear that I'm not a big political guy. I don't think politicians are going to save everything. But there's a lot of people that trust that system. And when they start to turn over to that direction, I think everybody kind of changes. As you guys have probably seen, I don't want to jinx it. I know it's very early, but it seems like we have a nice breath of fresh air in Alberta with this new Premier, Danielle.
Yeah.
It's almost brought me to tears hearing her speak the last 2 days, talking about how she thinks the unvaccinated are the most segregated population basically in the history of the province. Hearing her come out on her second day and say that she's going to fire the chief medical officer, that's pretty fucking based. Like, I think you're going to see is people think they don't want leaders like that. Okay. And we're going to see people in Alberta, we all have a friend or a relative in Alberta, and life's just going to start getting better for them. And I think it's eventually going to trickle down pressure this way. And that's my biggest hope. Like, I hope we can get out of this peacefully. I hope that people can start to see that, freedom's for everyone. Freedom isn't just for this freedom crowd that we have right now. Everybody violates it. And in my opinion, I would choose liberty over safety any day of the week. And I think we've just been straight lied to about every single thing. And I think it's hard to believe the lies these people have done and how they're capable of being so evil. But they really are. Like, they really, truly are. They're rotten to the core. And I have not been shy about saying that. We've had a really nice stream, so I won't get too into that. But yeah, no, like, like Justin Trudeau, like, that guy's like Satan to me, man. I can't even look at his face. He's disgusting. He's a vile human being, and I'll leave it at that. He's just, he's just. I don't know how you could look at a demographic of 5 million people and call them racist and misogynist and this stuff, and then people will say to me, like, how can you hate someone like that? And everyone's talking about a hate crime. Well, how can you not hate somebody who calls you racist and a homophobe and a misogynist and a fringe minority, and it took us a long time to realize that there is no fringe minority. The fringe minority is these globalists and these puppets and this little group of elite people. That's what the fringe minority is. People have always been scared to speak against the state, to speak against the government. And we know why, because they lock people up who do. You see it right now. There's political prisoners in Canada. There's a couple dozen of them. There's people that we don't even know. There was just a guy that I didn't even know he was in jail. And I seen him in Ottawa at the convoy, and he was a little bit of a chubbier dude, and he never had a shirt on. And he was always just putting a peace sign up and smoking a joint. And that was who this guy was. He was just like this peaceful hippie guy who minded his business. And I guess when the Lions started pushing people back, he just sat down on the ground and like put a love symbol up or something like that. And they considered that obstructing justice because he was blocking their line, resisting arrest because he wouldn't put his hands behind his back. He was going, I love you, I love you, I love you, like trying to send it, like the it really depends, and we got this emergency review committee that's coming up that starts tomorrow. We're going to have to see what truly gets uncovered in this. We're going to have to see what comes out. I'm a little bit hopeful, like last week, Peter Slowly, the ex-Ottawa police chief, he came out and he said that him as a police chief, he never requested the Emergencies Measure Act. Now, Stephen Bell, the bald police chief, he already said he never asked for it. Brenda Lucky, the RCMP commissioner, she never asked for it. They went to the OPP, they went everywhere. Every single police force says they didn't ask for it. And our public safety minister, Marco Mendicino, says they asked for it. So he's caught in a lie. And I honestly have no idea how they haven't laid a criminal charge on him. I'm hopeful that they're waiting until this inquiry is done in case there's more, but we're going to have to see what happens. I like to be hopeful because if you're not hopeful, what do you got to look forward to? So we'll have to see what happens in these next 7 or 8 weeks or so here. But, a couple other things that's going to be good to see is a lot of people forget that Tamara Leach, Pat King, Chris Barber, these people who were organizers who actually put this convoy on, none of them have been able to talk because of their charges. They're not allowed to talk about any of this because they still have to go to trial. However, when they go under oath and they're in front of this commission, they're allowed to talk about everything. So they've never been able to speak about anything that's happened since their arrest. And now they're going to be able to talk. Also, they're going to be cross-examining Justin Trudeau, Marco Mendicino, Chrystia Freeland, Bill Blair, all these people. So I'm really hoping they bring the heat, and I'm really hoping that we can get some justice out of this.
Well, it does seem like the legal system here in Canada has held up in terms of all these charges not sticking, and like there is a legal foundation to Canada that has held up to a great extent, and so I think that is a good point of faith and hope and know your rights, basically.
Hey, you know what, man? I agree with you on that. A lot of people talk about our flawed legal system. If I got anything to say about it, is it takes way too long to get the justice. But however, there's a system we go through, and I think once you move up the courts, I think it's there. Some of these people at the bottom can be bought and paid for. But even with the Emergencies Measures Act, when that was invoked, I don't know if you guys recall, the vote was about to go to the Senate, and there was rumors that it wasn't going to go through the Senate, and that if it didn't go through the Senate, that would have triggered an automatic election right there. So I don't know if you recall, but right literally an hour before or 20 minutes before they were about to vote in the Senate, Justin Trudeau goes, "Oh, there's no need for the Emergencies Measures Act anymore. We're going to shut it down." so they didn't
Yes.
have to vote on it.
Yes.
Like, this guy is so corrupt and so crooked. He knew he could invoke this act, and before they voted on it, he could have that city cleared out, and he could beat the shit out of everybody, and then he could just run away from it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, he does seem like a kind of emotionally immature coward. Like, he just seems like he actually takes things personally and throws tantrums, which is a scary thing for someone who's really in power. You know, he has behaved in a way that on the world stage even was talked about very critically, which I think was another big push forward, that for all the Canadians who could not see his corruption, a lot of his corruption was then criticized on the world stage, and that made its way back into Canadian discourse. And I think that was like a helpful feedback loop as well. Do you have anything else that you wanted to bring up before we wrap up?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where can people find your work, Rob, and your offerings, and how can they support you?
Well, where you could find me, I guess my biggest platform is TikTok, which is funny because I don't even know anything about that platform. I just post a video and people say, I know you're from TikTok, but I'm on TikTok at the Rob Primo, I believe, and Instagram at the Rob Primo as well. And I also started a YouTube channel recently, and you would just search Rob Primo, ROBPRIMO. I'm actually going to be starting a podcast the next couple of weeks, kind of something like you guys are doing right here. That's one way I plan on contributing to this fight. One thing I've learned in this is that I need to be a part of this, but I also need to find some balance. I do have a family and 3 children that I love more than anything in the world. So I need to fight for their future, but I need to make sure that I put them at the forefront of things. So I'll be focusing a lot on this podcast, having guests on there, going over current events, trying to cover, events that people won't cover to get the truth out there. So yeah, that's all I'm looking for. I also have a Telegram channel called t.me/the Rob Primo. I get banned on all these things all the time, Twitter, YouTube, wherever. So you can always find me in my Telegram channel. That's the best spot to find me and all my new links.
Excellent.
Wonderful.
Excellent. Yeah.
Thanks for being out there and doing all the work, and yeah.
Hey,
It's
you know
amazing.
what? We're all in this together, and I don't mean the COVID scheme, right? I like
Yeah.
to say everyone's found their footing in a fight, and please, anybody who listens to this podcast, find out where you belong, where you can help out. You guys are here doing a podcast right now, Maybe your job is to share this podcast. Maybe your job is to set up some type of barter relationship in a community. There's all different levels of connection, and we need to support each other and not this corrupt system. That's for sure.
Hell yeah, that's a great
Yes.
message. I love it. Well,
Yeah.
thanks again
Incredible.
for joining us on the show, and we'd love to have you back on again in the future.
Yeah, anytime you want. You guys take care and have a great day.
All right,
All right, take care.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.